بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي الأولين والآخرين وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أيها الإخوة. In this lesson we will study and speak about the rulings and the description of kafnul mayyit or takfinul mayyit, meaning shrouding the body of the deceased. So in the previous lesson we spoke about ghusl al-mayyit, how to give or how to wash the body of the deceased, male or female. And in this lesson, takfinul mayyit, meaning how to shroud the body in the kafan. And before we begin speaking about the description, how the body is shrouded, then there are certain ahkam that we need to know. The first of them is, what is the hukam, meaning what is the Islamic ruling of shrouding the body? Now, who knows the hukam of shrouding the body? Fard kifaya. Also, like we said, everything regarding the janaza and every step of the janaza, it is fardu kifaya. So a group of Muslims have to fulfill this obligation. If a group of Muslims fulfill the obligation, then the burden and the sin is removed from everybody else. And if a group of Muslims do not shroud the body of the deceased, then every single Muslim in that community is sinning and responsible until the obligation is fulfilled. And this is the meaning of fardu kifaya. And what is the evidence that it is fardu kifaya, or why is it fardu kifaya? Firstly, to honor the Muslim, and the Muslim remains honored in this life and in the hereafter. So from takrimul mayyit, from honoring the Muslim after he has died, is shrouding his body. And also due to the command of the Prophet ﷺ to shroud the body of the deceased. Like the hadith of Ibn Abbaas radiallahu anhuma, which we discussed previously in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, when that man died in Arafah, Yom Arafah, and he was standing next to the Prophet ﷺ, he said sallallahu alayhi wasallam, اغسلوه بماء وسدر, wash him with water and sidr, وكفنوه في ثوبين, and shroud him in two pieces of cloth, because he was in a state of ihram. The point is that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam ordered for his body to be shrouded. And also the ijma' of the ulama, the ijma' of the ummah, that it is an obligation for the body to be shrouded. The next hukam, or the next ruling, is who is obligated to pay for the shrouding of the deceased. Naam, the shroud itself and anything else which is related to the shrouding of the deceased, who is obligated to pay for it? Who knows? Ahsan. Firstly, it comes from the wealth of the deceased. This is the first thing we look at, that before his inheritance is given out, before any debts are paid, before a wasiyah is carried out, before any of his charitable requests are carried out, first we take from his wealth that which covers his funeral. And this includes the washing and the shrouding, the burial, the cost of the grave, the cost of transport. All of this is known as mu'unatul tajheez. Mu'unatul tajheez means the cost of preparing for his burial. And when we say that it is taken from the inheritance or the money which he leaves behind, that is if there is nobody else to pay for it, meaning wujuban, this is the obligation. But if somebody came along and paid for it, then this is a form of sadaqah. Okay, if the deceased person did not have any money. Let's say the deceased person left no money behind, and therefore there's no money to pay for his shroud. Then who is the next person upon whom the obligation falls upon? Who knows? Even before that? Sorry? No. Meaning those people who were obligated to spend on him during his lifetime, then they are the same ones who are obligated to shroud him after his death. So for example, the father towards a son. Just as the father was obligated to maintain his son, then likewise after his death, if there is no money that he has, then it falls upon him, his awliya, and those who are close to him. And then if there was no money even with the family, then as Salik said, Baytul Mal, Baytul Mal al-Muslimin, meaning the wealth of the Muslim state or the government. It is their responsibility to pay for the shroud and mu'unatul tajheez, everything associated with the burial and the janaza. Because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ana waliyun liman la waliya lahu." I am the wali, meaning I am the guardian or the protector or the maintainer for the one who has no guardian. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was speaking as head of the Islamic state. So, and this is what we call Baytul Mal al-Muslimin, meaning money which is reserved by the Muslim state, which pays for these matters to look after the state of the Muslims. And then, if there is no money in Baytul Mal, or it does not exist, then the Muslims in general, because it is fardu kifaya. So either somebody donates, a group of people donate, or every single person is sinning until the body is shrouded. After this, what is the minimum obligation when it comes to shrouding the deceased? Meaning, what is the least that can be done in terms of shrouding the deceased to fulfill the conditions of the kafan? And before we speak about this, we have to understand the ruling of shrouding the muhrim and also shrouding the shaheed. So when it comes to shrouding the muhrim, then how is he shrouded, or in what is he shrouded? And we studied this previously. The muhrim, the person in the state of ihram, a person who went to do hajj, went to do umrah, assumed the state of ihram, and then died during or whilst being in a state of ihram. Saleh? Ahsant. Naam. He is shrouded in his ihram, or in other two pieces of garment which are an ihram, and his head is not covered. So his body is washed, and he's shrouded in his ihram or in a ihram, and he's not perfumed, and neither is his head covered. Because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that hadith of Ibn Abbaas, when that man died in Yawm Arafah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ighsiluhu bima'in wa sidrin wa kaffinuhu fi thawbayhi." Wash him with water and sidr, and shroud him in his two garments, meaning al-ihram. وَلَا تُحَنِّطُوهُ وَلَا تُخَمِّرُوا رَأْسَهُ. And do not perfume him, and neither cover his head. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ مُلَبِّيًا. Because Allah will resurrect him on Yawm al-Qiyamah in a state of saying the talbiyah. So this is with regards to the muhrim, a person in the state of ihram during umrah or hajj. Then we come to the shaheed. And what did we say regarding the shaheed? How is the shaheed to be shrouded? Abu Imad? Ahsant. Naam. In the clothing that he was wearing. So his clothing is not stripped from him, and neither is his blood cleaned, nor is he given a ghusl, and neither is a salat al-janazah prayed upon him. Rather, the shaheed is buried as they are in their blood, in their clothing, without a salah. Firstly, when we say shaheed, who are we referring to specifically? Which type of shaheed? Shaheedul ma'raka, shaheedul qital, shaheedul jihad fi sabilillah. This is the shaheed which we are speaking about. As for the other type of shuhada, then they have a similar reward in the akhirah, but the ahkam of the dunya don't apply to them. Like we said, a person who died in a building which collapsed, a person who drowned in the sea, a woman who passed away due to labor, childbirth, a person who died due to a disease in the stomach, etc. They are shuhada, insha'Allah, in the akhirah, but the rulings of the dunya don't apply to them, meaning in terms of how the janazah is done. So with regards to the shaheed, then his armor is removed, his weaponry is removed, shields, helmets, etc. they are removed. And then the shaheed is buried in the clothing and in the blood which he died upon. And there is no ghusl, and there is no kafan, and there is no salah. What is the wisdom behind all of this? Firstly, the evidence is that this is what the Prophet ﷺ did with the martyrs of Uhud. Those who died, they were buried like this. And the Messenger ﷺ, he said regarding the martyrs of Uhud, he said, "Zammiluhum fi dima'ihim." And in one narration, "Zammiluhum fi thiyabihim," meaning cover them in their blood. I bury them in their blood as they are, or bury them in their clothing. And why is it that they are not washed, they are not shrouded, there is no salah upon them? Firstly, some of the fuqaha mention, so that the athar of martyrdom, it remains upon their body. The signs of martyrdom, mean the blood that they gave up for the sake of Allah, for the sake of Islam, it remains upon their body. Secondly, because the Messenger ﷺ, he swore by Allah that their blood on Yawm al-Qiyamah, he said, "Lawnu lawnu dam wa rihu rihul misk," that the color will be the color of blood, but the fragrance will be the fragrance of perfume. And also with regards to why is no salah prayed upon the shaheed, because the salah, yani salatul janazah, is a type of shafa'ah for the people who have passed away. They said the status of the shaheed is so great with Allah that it does not require any type of shafa'ah. So subhanallah, even in the absence of salatul jama'ah is an indicator of how great the status of the shaheed is. And the exception to this is if the body of the martyr has been mutilated, tortured, or his clothing it is completely ripped, or the body is naked, for example, then a shroud is placed over them, or a shroud is placed over the clothing which they are wearing. So if there is a need for a shroud, then the shrouding can be over their body without a ghusl, or if they are naked, as I have mentioned. And then Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, in his book, he said, what if there are many people who die and there are not enough shrouds? Then what do we do? If there are many people who are dying and we don't have enough shrouds to cover or wrap the body of the deceased. And of course, ayyuhal ikhwa, these rulings the fuqaha mentioned because there may be a time when this occurs, or it already occurred. So these aren't just hypothetical situations which will never occur. There may be a time where this occurs. So and all of us appreciate this, only a few years ago during COVID, the number of deaths reached a number which it had not reached for maybe 100 years. Masajid were used to 2 or 3 people dying in a year, and all of a sudden 40 or 50 or 60 people and their janaiz were being held. So these things we study, these masail we study because either they have occurred or they may well occur in the future. So what happens if many people pass away and there are not enough shrouds? It is permitted to shroud more than one person in the same kafan. It is permitted to shroud 2 or 3 people, for example, in the same kafan. And then they are all placed in the same grave. And the one who is placed closest to the lahad, to the niche or the side of the grave, is the one who knows more from the Quran. And this is because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did this with those who were martyred on the battle of Al-Uhud. Anas radiallahu anhu narrates, and the hadith is in Abu Dawud wa sahahu al-Albani, that on the day of Al-Uhud, kathurat al-qatla wa qallat al-thiyab, that there were many people who were martyred and there were only a few shrouds. وَكَانَ يَجْمَعُ الثَّلَاثَةَ وَالْإِثْنَيْنِ فِي قَبْرٍ وَاحِدٍ. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he would bury 2 or 3 in the same grave. وَيَسْأَلُ أَيُّهُمْ أَكْثَرْ قُرْآنًا. And he would ask who amongst them knows the most Quran. فَيُقَدَّمْ فِي اللَّحَدِ. And there was the person who was placed first in the lahad. وَكَفَّنَ الرَّجُلَيْنِ وَالثَّلَاثَ فِي الثَّوْبِ الْوَاحِدِ. And the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam shrouded 2 or 3 people in the same shroud, in the same kafan. And now we come to an ordinary Muslim who passes away. So we spoke about the shaheed, we spoke about the muhrim, we spoke about when there isn't enough shrouds. What is the minimum obligation for the kafan of a normal Muslim? Some of the ulama said that the absolute minimum obligation is to cover the awrah of the Muslim. This is the absolute minimum obligation, that if the whole body cannot be covered with 3 or more cloths, then the awrah has to be covered. They said because this was the obligation during his lifetime, meaning when he was alive, the awrah has to be covered. And therefore this is the obligation after he has passed away. Others said that the minimum obligation is the covering of the whole body. The whole body meaning the face, the head, to the toes, everything has to be covered. And even if it's just one cloth, even if it is not white, and any color and any type of cloth, the minimum is that at least his body has to be covered. And there are various evidences for this. First, the hadith of Jabir radiallahu an in Sahih Muslim, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خطب يوما. That one day the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he gave a khutbah, and it was mentioned to him that somebody had passed away. فَكُفِّنَ فِي كَفَنٍ غَيْرِ طَائِلٍ. And the man was shrouded in a shroud which was not long, meaning some of his body was not covered. وَقُبِرَ لَيْلًا. And he was buried at night, meaning he was buried at night without any salah being prayed over him. فَزَجَرَهُمُ النَّبِيُّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he rebuked the people who were there. And then he said, إِذَا كَفَّنَ أَحَدُكُمْ أَخَاهُ فَلْيُحَسِّنْ كَفَنَهُ. That whenever one of you shrouds his brother, then shroud him well. And so the meaning of فَلْيُحَسِّنْ كَفَنَهُ, shroud him well, does not mean shroud him with an expensive fabric or expensive garments, meaning shroud him fully, the whole body, because the body had not been shrouded. And also the hadith of Mus'ab ibn Umair radiallahu anhu, when he died, the only thing which he left behind was the garment which he was wearing. And Khabbab radiallahu an and Abdurrahman ibn Auf and others, they mention, and this was during the battle of Uhud, he was also martyred, that when they covered his head, when they shrouded his upper body, his feet would become bare. And when they shrouded his lower body, then his upper body would become bare. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he ordered the people to begin with the upper body, the head and the upper body, and then cover his feet with some form of leaf or grass or something like this. It was al-adkhar, and al-adkhar or al-idkhir, it is what we call lemongrass. Al-muhim, it's a type of grass. So if the minimum obligation was only the awrah, then the Prophet ﷺ would have sufficed with this. But he ordered his upper body to be covered first, and then his feet were covered with a type of grass, because this is what was available. So this is the absolute minimum that the body has to be shrouded with, even if it is only one cloth, any color, but the whole body should be shrouded. If the whole body cannot be shrouded, then we begin with the head and whatever we can cover from the upper body, and we cover the lower body with whatever we can find. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was a type of grass. However, what are the guidelines of the kafan which are recommended? Meaning, what is the best way to shroud the body of the deceased? The first guideline is that we should use white cloth. The kafan, it should be white. Now, if we cannot find white, then any cloth, any color. But it is recommended, it is mustahab for it to be white. Because the Messenger ﷺ, he said, "Albisu min thiyabikum al-biyad wa kaffinu mawtakum bil-bayad." That wear white clothes and shroud your deceased in white clothes. And this is from the angle of istihbab. I mean, that which is encouraged and recommended for the Muslims is to wear clothes which are white, and also shroud the deceased in white garments or pieces of cloth, not garments. Secondly, the second guideline is that it should be 3 pieces of fabric. It should be 3 pieces of cloth or fabric. And this is especially for the men. And this is because the Messenger ﷺ was shrouded like this. In the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كفن في 3 أثواب يمانية بيض سحولية من كرسف ليس فيهن قميص ولا عمامة. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was shrouded with 3 white cotton pieces of cloth, yamaniya, and he was not shrouded in a qamis, neither was he shrouded with an imama, with a turban. So 3 white cotton cloths he was shrouded in, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the female who passes away, then the fuqaha and the madhahib, and all 4 madhahib, they mention that she should be shrouded in 5 pieces of cloth. And that is 1 cloth for her lower body, and then another cloth for her upper body, and then 3 cloths for her whole body. So the male is 3 cloths for the whole body, wrapped around his whole body and tied. As for the female, a piece of cloth for the lower body, a piece of cloth for the upper body, and then 3 pieces of cloth which shroud her whole body. And Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, he mentions in his book Ahkamul Janaiz, he said, Al-mar'atu karrajul, that a deceased woman is no different from a deceased man. And he mentioned that there's no evidence, there's no clear evidence from the Sunnah that for the man is 3 and for the woman is 5. So he considers it to be 3. However, the reason why the fuqaha mention 3 for the men and 5 for the woman, because of her awrah, and how while she was alive, her awrah is more emphasized, and it is covered with more clothing than the awrah of the man. And they said similarly after she has died, because of the nature of the awrah of a woman and her body parts, etc. Then min bab al-ihtiyat, to be on the safe side, they mention the using of 5 pieces of cloth. Wallahu a'lam. It is also from the guidelines is that it is haram for a man to be shrouded in silk. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was shrouded in qutn, in sahuliyya, and sahuliyya is a type of cotton from Yemen. As for silk, then this is haram upon the men. Why is it haram? Because firstly, silk is considered to be effeminate. Now, cloth that women wear is not considered to be something which men wear. Also because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forbade men from wearing silk. He said, "La talbisu al-harir," do not wear silk, meaning the men. So the fuqaha said that just as silk is haram upon the men during their lifetime, then similarly it is haram for them to be shrouded in it after their death. Of course, if there is no other cloth, then silk can be used as a shroud. As for women being shrouded in silk, the ruling differs between some fuqaha considering to be mubah, permitted, and others consider it to be makruh, something which is disliked. So those who said that it is mubah, it is permitted, they said because just as she was permitted in her lifetime to wear silk, then similarly after her death she's permitted to be shrouded in silk. Those who consider it to be makruh, they said because the reason why she was permitted to be shrouded in silk during her lifetime is for the sake of beauty. Naam, to beautify herself with that type of clothing. And with death, then this illah or this reasoning, it finishes, and therefore there is no need for her to be shrouded in silk. And also because there is a level of israf, there is a level of wastage and overspending and extravagance in being shrouded in expensive cloth or fabric like silk. So Allah knows best. Also, it is disliked for the shroud to be dyed with any color. As we mentioned, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was shrouded in plain white cotton shrouds, and he ordered or encouraged with shrouding in white. And also any other type of israf or al-mughalah, any other type of wastage or extravagance or overspending when it comes to the shroud, whether it's the type of cloth or the number of shrouds which are used, or the company that it is bought from, or if there's a particular make to it, anything which comes under israf, overspending, extravagance, then it is disliked. And there are various evidences for this. If anybody was deserving of expensive fabric for the kafan, then the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be deserving of it. However, he was shrouded in 3 plain white cotton cloths from Yemen. Now, very normal fabric. And also in the hadith of Abu Bakr radiallahu an, Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentioned the hadith in Sahih Bukhari that when death was approaching Abu Bakr radiallahu an, نظر إلى ثوب كان يمرض فيه. He looked at a piece of cloth that was being used when he was ill. He said, اغسلوا هذا. He said, wash this fabric or this piece of cloth. وزيدوا عليه ثوبين. And add 2 more pieces of cloth. وكفنوني فيها. And shroud me in these 3 pieces of cloth. Aisha radiallahu anha said, Inna hadha khalaqun. This is something which is old, meaning this cloth which we are using to wipe your body, to cover you, this is old cloth. He replied, Al-hayy ahaqqu bil-jadid min al-mayyit. That the one who is living is deserving of new clothing. The one who has passed away is not in need of new clothing. Innama huwa lil-muhla. It is only for al-muhla. And the ulama mention al-muhla ay ad-dam was-sadid, meaning blood and bodily discharge. Meaning, why is a shroud required? A shroud is required to cover the blood, to merely cover the body, to cover any discharge, any pus which may come out of the body. This is why the shroud is required. not to beautify a person and to extravagance and spending. So therefore, any type of mubalagha, any type of israf, any type of extravagance, all of it is disliked. Also from the guidelines with regards to the kafan is for the body to be perfumed and the kafan to also be perfumed. The cloth, the shroud is also perfumed. So the body is perfumed with fragrance 3 times, and also the kafan is perfumed with al-hunut. And al-hunut, even today we use it. It is solid, so it is fragrance, but it comes in a solid form, like a small white block, which can easily be broken up and placed around the kafan. So this is also that which is recommended. And this applies to both the men and the women. So this perfume is used on the body of the male and the shroud of the male, and also is used on the body of the female and the shroud of the female. And Al-Albani rahimahullah mentions the hadith of Asma bint Abi Bakr, who said to her family, أجمروا ثيابي إذا أنا مت ثم كفنوني ثم حنطوني. She said, أجمروا ثيابي, meaning perfume my thobe. The meaning of thobe here is the piece of cloth that she's going to be shrouded by when I die. ثم كفنوني, then shroud me. ثم حنطوني, and then use hunut, meaning use perfume to perfume my shroud. And also the hadith of Ibn Abbaas, when the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said regarding the muhrim, وَلَا تُحَنِّطُوهُ, do not perfume him with hunut. This shows that غير muhrim, the person who is not in a state of ihram, is to be perfumed. So these are very basic guidelines with regards to the shroud. Of course, we mentioned that after these series of lessons, we'll be doing practical sessions in the janaza room, in which we will show how a body is to be shrouded practically and some of the practical guidelines we have to bear in mind. But generally speaking, what we do and what happens in most places is that you have a body which has been washed and the body is naked except the awrah. The awrah is covered, and the awrah is covered with a heavy cloth and a white cloth. Now, usually like a very large towel. And this is so that it does not slip or the awrah does not become exposed. And of course, in this country, because we have to use the caskets, the boxes, then what we usually do is we place all 3 sheets or pieces of the cloth inside the casket. So you will find that the first cloth is placed, and then the second one on top of it, and the third one on top of it. And all of that is placed in the casket. And when I say in the casket, meaning it is laid out, so some of it is in the casket, and the rest of it flows over the side. And if one of those 3 pieces of cloth are larger than the other, then that is the outer one. I mean, that is the one that is placed first, and anything else which is small is placed on top. And then the body, after it has been washed and perfumed and made to look nice and tidy, etc., as we discussed, it is then moved from the washing table and moved into the casket and is placed directly on top of those 3 pieces of cloth. And during this time, the awrah, it remains covered. So that towel is not removed until at least the first kafan is completely shrouding the body, then we remove the towel. Otherwise, the towel remains until that happens. So the body is placed into the casket or on top of the kafan. Then we often use wool, the wool, and we place it in any orifice of the body, meaning the ears and the nostrils, and also near the private parts. So if there is any discharge from the nose or the ears or from the private parts, then it is absorbed by that wool or that cotton, and it does not soil the shroud. And then after this, we said the body is perfumed, and also we use hunut, and we place it around the body and around the shroud and between the three pieces of shroud. Then after this, the left side of the cloth is placed on top of the body, and then the right side of the cloth is wrapped around the body. So this is the upper cloth. Naam. And then the second one, the same is done. And then the third one, the same is done. And then after this, a knot is tied at the head and also at the feet. And the face, it remains covered. And the face is not allowed to be uncovered for the general public. But if there is somebody who is close to the deceased, like his wife, like for example his father, his father-in-law, his uncle, his son for example, or very, very close friend, then they can come and they can momentarily uncover the face, and then they can cover the face, and then they cover the face again. And this is as Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that which we see in many masajid, in which the face of the body is uncovered, and then everybody comes, men and women, related and unrelated to the person, and everybody comes and looks at the face of the deceased, then this is something which should be avoided. And always the hurma, the sanctity of the deceased person has to be protected. And as you know, when people pass away, there are all sorts of injuries that people pass away from, and in different forms or shapes that the body may take, and different injuries or defects on different parts of the body, including the face. So all of it remains covered, and we respect the privacy and the sanctity or the honor of the deceased, except for those few people who are very close to the mayyit. And when it comes to the women, then specifically those who he was mahram towards. Not every and any woman comes and looks at the body of the deceased. So this is al-muhim, this is how the body of the deceased is shrouded. And in the next lesson, we will be covering as-salatu ala al-mayyit, salatul janaza, and then the guidelines of carrying the body and then burying the body. And then after this, adab ziyaratul qabr, the etiquette of visiting the graveyard. And then after this, bi'idhnillah, the practical demonstrations. هذا والله أعلم بالله التوفيق وصلى الله على نبينا وسلم. If there's any questions regarding the lesson, you're welcome to ask your question. Fadal.
What is shrouding?
Sorry? Shroud. Shroud is the cloth that a dead body is covered with. And it has to be 3 cloths for the man. Fadal Saleh. أخاه فليحسن كفنه. The hadith of Jabir in Sahih Muslim. When one of you shrouds his brother, then let him shroud him well. And the meaning of yuhassin kafanahu, meaning he said as-sitr wat-tawassut wan-nadhafa, that it should be clean and it should be moderate and it should cover the body. And it does not mean al-israf wal-mubalagha wal-ghala. It does not mean extravagance and overspending. There's the words of Shaykh Al-Bani rahimahullah. Now, if it's a martyr, then the martyr is buried, the martyr is shrouded in the clothes that he was wearing, and then shrouded. Why would they be shrouded? And why did the Prophet did this with some of the martyrs? Perhaps because their clothing was, a lot of it was naked, and there wasn't enough clothing. As for normal people, obviously you're asking from the angle of the aura, touching and being. I'll check inshallah. I need to get back to you. Jazakallah khair. نعم, because in the hadith of Ibn Abbas, he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, اغسلوه بماء وسدر, and sidr is not perfume. Sidr is a detergent-like substance, so it's not perfume. If there's no other questions, جزاكم الله خير وصلى الله على نبينا وسلم.